Lord Armand, a noble whose love for his own reflection could rival any poet's love for words. It was unveiled one summer evening in the great hall. Candlelight flickered across the huge canvas, illuminating Lord Armand's face, strong jaw, perfect posture, and eyes painted to look almost divine. The guests clapped, some in awe, others in fear of staying silent. Among the servants lined up at the back stood Camilla, a 20-year-old maid in a simple yellow dress. Her eyes lingered on the painting longer than anyone else's, not because of admiration, but because of something that burned quietly in her chest. Once, Camilla had been an artist herself. She had learned to mix colors from wildflowers, to paint with emotion rather than gold. But her gift was dismissed when she was sold to the castle as a servant after her father's debts. Now, every day, she swept the very halls where paintings hung, her hands stained with dust instead of color. Each time she passed that new portrait, it seemed to mock her. Lord Armand's smirk, frozen in oil and pigment, followed her every step. The guests praised it. The maids whispered how lifelike it was. But Camilla only saw vanity, the kind of vanity that starves the soul. And slowly, that jealousy, that ache of lost talent, began to grow into something dangerous. It was past midnight, when the castle finally fell silent. The torches dimmed, the guards yawned at their posts, and the moonlight stretched long silver fingers across the marble floors. Camilla's heart pounded as she crept through the great hall, clutching a small pot of ink she had stolen from the scribe's room. She knew the risk theft alone could earn a whipping, but she wasn't thinking of consequences now. Only justice. The painting loomed above her, massive and smug. Lord Armand's painted eyes seemed almost alive in the moonlight. "You think you're perfect," she whispered, anger trembling in her voice. "Let's see how perfect you look with a fool's grin." She dipped a brush and began to paint over his lips, twisting them into a crooked smile. A few bold strokes later, his regal nose turned long and bent. She giggled softly. For the first time in months, she felt free. But her laughter echoed too loudly. A sudden light flared behind her, the glow of a lantern. A guard's voice barked, "Who goes there?" Camilla froze. The brush fell from her hand, splattering ink across the polished floor. Before she could run, rough hands seized her arms. The guard's eyes darted to the ruined portrait, and his face turned pale. "Lord Armand will see this before dawn," he muttered. "You've signed your own death, girl." At sunrise, the castle was already buzzing with whispers. The Lord's portrait ruined. The maid caught. Camilla stood before Lord Armand in the grand hall, surrounded by knights and courtiers. Her yellow dress was torn, her hair tangled from the night's struggle, but her chin remained high. The Lord's face was cold as marble as he stared at her. Behind him, the disfigured painting loomed like a ghost of pride. "Why?" he asked quietly, though his tone was laced with fury. "What crime did I commit that earned such defilement?" Camilla met his gaze without flinching. "You built a shrine to yourself while we starve," she said. "You call it art. I call it vanity." The room went silent. No one dared breathe. For a moment, the Lord's hand twitched as if reaching for his sword. But instead, a slow, cruel smile spread across his lips. "So you think yourself an artist? Then you shall learn the price of mockery. I will not have your blood stain my floors. I prefer your laughter to echo through them instead." Camilla frowned in confusion. "Laughter?" He turned to the guards. "Take her to the dungeon. Let her pride be tickled out of her bones." The courtiers laughed nervously, unsure if he was joking or mad. But the lord's eyes stayed fixed on Camilla. Let the girl who mocked art become a jest herself. The dungeon lay beneath the castle, a maze of stone corridors damp with centuries of sorrow. Dripping water echoed like distant footsteps. There, waiting in the flicker of torchlight, was Borin, the old dungeon keeper. His back was bent, his beard grey as smoke, and his eyes gleamed with a strange mix of wisdom and mischief. "Ah," he croaked when he saw her, "so you're the one who insulted the Lord's nose. Brave, but foolish." Camilla was chained lightly to a wooden bench, not cruelly, but enough to keep her from moving. Borin shuffled through a chest and pulled out the strangest tools she had ever seen: feathers, soft brushes, even bundles of hay tied with string. She frowned. "You mean to torture me with that?" He grinned. "Aye, lass. Not every punishment must draw blood. Some simply draw laughter." At first, she tried to remain defiant, but the moment the first feather touched her bare arms, she gasped and twisted. Laughter burst from her, unwillingly, wild, uncontrolled. The brushes danced along her sides, her ribs, her neck, and soon she was laughing so hard tears streamed down her cheeks. Borin chuckled between strokes. "You think yourself high and mighty. Even queens laugh like fools down here." Camilla struggled to breathe, to speak between fits of laughter. "Enough, please, I can't." Her laughter filled the dungeon like music, a strange, humiliating symphony. But as the minutes turned to an hour, something in her began to shift. The anger that had burned inside her started to melt away with every uncontrollable giggle. When Borin finally stopped, her body trembled with exhaustion. Her hair clung to her damp cheeks, and her eyes were red from tears, not of pain, but of something she couldn't name. High above, unseen through a narrow window, Lord Armand had been watching the entire scene. That night, after the dungeon door was unlocked, Camilla sat on the cold floor, hugging her knees. She whispered to herself, "I only wanted to paint again. I didn't want to hate." The door creaked open, and a shadow fell across the room. Lord Armand stepped inside, his cloak brushing the ground. He looked down at her, no longer angry, but thoughtful. "You defaced my image," he said softly, "and yet you laugh like a child. What sort of madness drives you?" Camilla lifted her head. "The kind that comes from envy. I thought destroying your painting would make me feel powerful. It didn't. It only made me small." Her honesty cut through the air like a blade. For a long moment, the Lord said nothing. Then he turned toward the ruined painting, which a guard had brought to the dungeon for evidence. "You say you could paint better," he said finally. "Could you?" Camilla hesitated. "If I still had my brushes, perhaps." He nodded slowly. "Then prove it. You'll paint again this time, under my roof. But remember, a true artist paints truth, not vanity." Weeks passed. The castle's mood changed as word spread that the maid had been forgiven. Some called her lucky, others foolish. But in the highest tower, where sunlight poured through arched windows, Camilla painted once more. Her hands trembled as she mixed colors, not from fear, but from emotion long buried. She painted not gold or jewels, but shadows and warmth, the faint lines of humanity in Lord Armand's face. She painted him as he truly was: proud, yes, but also lonely, fragile, mortal. When she unveiled the new portrait, the hall fell silent. It was beautiful, but not flattering. It showed not a god, but a man. Lord Armand stared at it for a long time. Finally, he laughed softly, the sound echoing through the hall like something rare and new. "You've captured what even I refused to see," he said. "Keep your brushes, Camilla. They belong to you more than they ever did to me." That night, the old, ruined portrait was quietly taken down. The new one, humble and honest, took its place. Servants whispered for months afterward about the maid who once defaced a lord's pride and instead painted his soul. Some said she became the castle's artist. Others said she left to teach art to the poor. But one thing remained certain: the dungeon no longer echoed with laughter. It echoed with memory. And sometimes, when the wind swept through the hall, the torches flickered just right, as if even the walls remembered the girl in the yellow dress, whose laughter changed a lord's heart.